Thank you for that introduction. As said, I graduated in the program last year, had an absolutely wonderful time, and now I'm working here in Norfolk with NATO ACT. Um, and I guess, you know, I don't necessarily have maybe the most structured remarks in the world, but I guess I would really focus on how well TAM prepared me for me to be able to work in the position that I'm with, not only just in the actual coursework, which is what you kind of hope from grad school anyway, but the whole experience. Obviously, getting to study across 3 different academic cultures and even getting to work in Germany a little bit, I got very used to multinational environments, which is NATO every day. I work with about 9 different countries, people from 9 different countries in my team. So it's definitely one of the huge benefits to have, um, which I realize isn't as applicable to some of our Swedes out there, but we are all very valued NATO partners, and there are some Swedes here. Um, so I guess really any kind of advice I could give anybody in terms of how to navigate grad school, and particularly the national security world afterwards, is really just, you're already starting in a great place. As TAM provides a really, really unique experience that can't really be compared to others. Just for I got into some of the other, I got in at King's College and war studies and things like that, so kind of maybe a bit more of the niche national security schools, but I ended up choosing TAM because of the extra breadth that it was able to bring, and that's actually been helpful pretty much every day. And I just can't emphasize enough how much of a difference it really makes getting to go across different countries, particularly if you're from the US, because that's not always the easiest opportunity to get, which I understand is a bit more restricted these days. But nevertheless, however the multinational experience looks like, virtual or otherwise, is still always greatly appreciated and of huge benefit. So the TAM program really does give, kind of that breadth of getting to cover everything from, welfare state economics to the, conflict in former Yugoslavia. It just makes you this really well-rounded person to go whichever direction you really want. It was particularly helpful for me in national security, and set you on a really good path. In terms of the field, lots of TAM graduates have gone into this. There are TAM grads at the Pentagon and the FBI, and I know at least one other at NATO in Brussels at one point or another, and all sorts of manner of other organizations as well. So there's already kind of a bit of a network in the national security world, at least in the US, fairly heavily, but definitely abroad as well, particularly with NATO, the EU, even the UN. So in terms of the actual work, there are a lot of ways that being a part of TAM lets you explore the different places that you could work in this world. So I'm a little less familiar with the actual US. I've never worked for the US government or anything. I've only ever worked directly for NATO. So I can definitely tell you that when you've already had that time living or working abroad, the idea of going on a work trip to the Brussels headquarters or to SHAPE or somewhere else, and you wind up just treating it like an average Tuesday. Which, to be fair, it is cool the first time you get to walk in. But after that, you're already so comfortable with being able to do that. And one of the things I definitely benefited from while at TAM is it gives you a little bit of the breathing space, depending on which track you take and which schools you choose, to be able to fit internships in and to start some of the processes that can be a little bit long. So like I said, I worked in Germany, so I was able to do a short internship with the German Marshall Fund, but about the same time I was accepted to that, I also got accepted at NATO. The difference being is NATO requires a security clearance, but the way the timing works out with the program is you can essentially get your clearance and start working right after graduation, unless you happen to have a particularly heavy criminal background. So you can really, really time things well. I don't have much else to say other than if you're in the program, make the absolute most of it. Go to everything, every single event that you can. Fill up your course schedule if you can at every school that you're at, and really take the opportunity when you have those extra months to try to find what you can in terms of internships. I guess in terms of NATO specific stuff, if there's anybody really interested out there, one particular thing of note is you have, if you're looking for example, like say a NATO job or something like that, you can type that in and you'll get a website and that'll help. But what they don't tell you is that each and every single NATO command and sub-command has internships. So for example, I've heard, whether, I know like if you're in the German-Turkish track, I know things can be a little bit difficult going to Turkey right now, particularly with travel, but if you apply for the internship at Land Command, Allied Land Command in Izmir, Turkey, you not only will you get the security clearance, you also get a visa waiver that'll let you go into Turkey, which even gets you through COVID restrictions. So it's the same case across all of those, whether it's Land Command, where I work, Allied Command Transformation, SHAPE, every single one of them has an internship program. So I wouldn't necessarily limit yourself to the typical job page that you might see. Really look into the organization and pull that out. And that's, I know that's NATO specifically. We're a bit of a unique bird in that regard. But I guess I'll leave it there. As Sarah mentioned, I'm happy to answer any questions. If there's any like immediate reactions, I can stick around for a little bit and I'll let Sarah moderate that. And otherwise, she has my contact info and I'm happy to answer any questions or talk to any of you any other time.
Thank you so much, Davis. And we will look forward to seeing you another time, hopefully in person.
Of course. Well, thank you very much. I was happy to talk to anybody. And again, feel free, anybody go ahead and reach out.
All right. Thank you so much. Next, Paul is going to introduce our next featured alumni speaker, Kelsey. I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Sarah. It is my honor to introduce our panelist, Kelsey Fraser. Kelsey works as an information management officer and head of chancellery at the Delegation of the International Committee of the Red Cross to the United Nations, supporting the organization's humanitarian diplomacy efforts. Ms. Fraser completed her undergraduate degree at High Point University in 2012, majoring in international trade and anthropology. After earning her bachelor's degree, she enrolled in the Transatlantic Master's Program to expand upon her interest in European politics and multilateral affairs. While in the TAM program, she completed her semesters abroad at the University of Bath in England and the University of Siena in Italy, and wrote her thesis on migrant domestic workers in Southern Europe. During her final semester in the TAM program, she worked as an intern at the U.S. mission to the United Nations, supporting the team negotiating the Sustainable Development Agenda. This further solidified her interest in multilateral relations. Like many graduates, Kelsey's path hasn't always been a straight line, but rather a journey filled with several ups and downs. After completing her master's degree in 2015, Kelsey embarked on an extensive job search, including a stint as an au pair in Germany and a research fellow in Geneva. Kelsey then found full-time work at the UK Embassy at the United States, UK Embassy to the United States as a governance officer within the Northern Ireland Bureau. In this role, she said the word Brexit far too many times than she thought was humanly possible, and was able to truly showcase her knowledge and subject matter depth that TAM provided her. In a fun connection, Kelsey actually spent her first semester of TAM chauffeuring one of our other panelists, Nora, around Chapel Hill. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Kelsey Fraser to our panel.
Thanks, Paul, for that nice introduction. And when I found out Nora was on the panel, I wanted to remind her how many places I drove her during that first month.
Thank you, Kelsey. I'll never forget that. Thank you.
So Paul highlighted my background. I'm currently living in New York. I work for the International Committee of the Red Cross. and it's their delegation to the United Nations. The Red Cross has observer status, so like permanent member states, we have a representation here in New York, and we work primarily as the guardians of international humanitarian law, and representing our operations, mostly providing testimony to the Security Council on various agenda items, most particularly recently Yemen, but I'm actually off this week, and I know that there was an AOB on a closer to a TAM topic about the outbreak of fighting with between Armenia and Azerbaijan this past week. So the European states don't make it in the council very often, but that one has made it into the council as an AOB. So we'll see how that goes and if it becomes a permanent agenda item. Prior to my current role, which I've been in for 2.5 years, I was at the UK Embassy in Washington, and I worked for the Northern Ireland Bureau, and I know Tam did a collaboration with a former employee, but I never got the chance to work with him, so I can't say I know much about, but I do know that another grad from our program is at Bertelsmann, so drawing all the connections there. And I worked mostly just on the desk for Northern Ireland, and I started in 2016, so that was just as Brexit negotiations were happening and working on some cultural affairs things, but mostly discussing with congressional liaison offices about the impact on Northern Ireland, the peace process there, and the long-term impacts on the small devolved region of the UK. And we worked very closely with the 2 other devolved governments, so it was a good exposure to less multilateral affairs, but understanding how these comparative government functions and the different legal statuses within the UK and their priorities, because the 3 devolved governments have very different priorities. And then, as Davis said, I first got my exposure to the UN environment, which I'm currently working as an intern for the US mission to the United Nations. I had the portfolio of the Sustainable Development Agenda just as it was being in the final stages of negotiation. So it was passed in September 2015, and I worked at the mission for the 6 months, the first 6 months of that year. So really the nitty-gritty details of the negotiations and the US position on the Sustainable Development Agenda, which is the primary catalyst for the UN right now. Almost everything every conversation has a link to that agenda and what it means for the long-term goals of the United Nations. And then after TAM, after the internship I did, I couldn't find a job. I worked in political magazines in New York, and then decided that I didn't want to move back in with my parents, so I became an au pair and taught English in Germany for 6 months. And then got a research fellowship in Geneva working at the Universal Rights Group, which is a human rights think tank, before I moved back to Washington for the role with the UK. So just, I'm proof that it doesn't have to be a straight and narrow path, and there was a lot of ups and downs, and I didn't think I would be 27 years old and taking care of children after having a master's degree, but it really served me well. And it was a great period in my life too, so I can't complain. So if you're frustrated, just keep applying. You will really get there. For my TAM experience, I was in Bath and Siena, and I had a wonderful time in both places. Academically, Bath was more rigorous, but I felt like I had a great exposure in Siena, and it helped me prepare for other areas postgraduate. So in terms of my current role, for those who are interested in multilateral affairs, just to give you kind of a heads up, the International Committee of the Red Cross works mostly in conflict zones, and we do offer associateships for those who are interested in more on the legal side in the New York office, but I would very much encourage you to look at our headquarters in Geneva. And instead of calling them internships, it's associates. It's a one-year paid internship, and it's a great exposure. I wish I had known about it before. And it's almost every department in our headquarters, which is almost 1,200 people, has one or two associates, and a lot of them end up working for the organization or going to the field and working in operations at some point. For me, the next steps probably, depending on my personal situation, if I stay with the Red Cross, I'd really like to get back a little bit closer to European politics. In that sense, I hope to work for our resource mobilization division, working in fundraising, because obviously a deal of our donations that fund our operations come from European states, and you see a lot of the values of European states reflected in which programs they donate to, specifically as it relates to COVID right now, and what their priorities are moving forward. So I am so glad I did TAM, not only because of professionally it prepared me, and also gave me a sense of resilience as I moved around and the ups and downs that I did face, but also because it formed some really good friendships, and I look back on those years in Bath and Siena, and it's really a fond time period in my life. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I seem to remember you had a cool volunteer gig when you were in DC and you were raising money. So would those skills come into play were you to jump to a development role?
Yeah, so I worked for Young Professionals in Foreign Policy as like a gala planner. And I wouldn't say it was particularly, I gained any particular skills that I didn't have. It was more of a networking opportunity in terms of meeting other people interested in foreign affairs in Washington and beyond. But in terms of fundraising, I think TAM, specifically learning about the national systems of government and welfare states, you really see that reflected in where the states donate when it comes to humanitarian and development aid. So you can see where their priorities are in terms of which countries and conflicts they support, but also which programs they support. A lot of our sexual violence and women's programs come from, unsurprisingly, from the Netherlands, Northern European states, and there's a huge push right now actually for mental health in conflict, and we're seeing that as being a driver. So we're trying to up our programs in those areas in order to receive the funding, to prove to them that we are active in that type of programming in the field.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. All right, well, thank you so much, Kelsey. We will probably jump back to you with some questions from the audience. And now we're going to hear from Mel. Jalen is going to introduce her.
Hello, can you all hear me? Okay, great. So Melissa Radkin, she is from the TAM class of 2010, where she was in the European governance track. Fun fact, during her time in TAM, the UNC college basketball team won a national championship in 2009. And during her second year, she spent it at the university in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where she did studies in her thesis. Her thesis focused on the European Union's influence on violent ethnic conflict in Europe, and she had a special focus on Northern Ireland, the Basque Country, and what today is referred to as Northern Macedonia. Shortly after graduating from the TAM program, she spent 6 months interning with World Learning to work on State Department exchange programs. She was able to find this internship through a TAM alum connection. Prior to TAM, she studied at Wisconsin Lutheran College, where she majored in political science, and she spent 1 year abroad in England at the University of York studying politics and international relations. The internship that I mentioned earlier that she did after the TAM program led to a full-time position in Washington, D.C., where she worked in grants, finance, and operations for the next 9 years. From 2011 to 2013, she worked at World Learning, where she had her internship. And from 2013 to 2019, she worked at JSI Research and Training Institute. Last summer in 2019, she moved to Chicago to work with the US Soccer Federation as a grants program manager. Last July was also when the US women's soccer team won the World Cup. So that's around the time that she again worked there. Currently, Melissa manages scholarship programs and runs grants programs for new projects to increase the number of players and coaches. Outside of the work world in her education, Melissa has taken piano lessons for 14 years, and she played sports throughout her life all the way through high school, soccer, baseball, and basketball. And she really enjoys watching sports such as soccer, And she really likes live music and concerts. One of her favorite bands is U2, and she is also a big fan of Shakespeare. During her time in Washington, D.C., there were 2 theaters, and she had season tickets to both of them to go watch shows and plays. And that is all I have to say for my introduction.
Thank you, Jalen. So yeah, as mentioned, I graduated from TAM in 2010. It's part of the first European governance track. We like to refer to ourselves as the TAM track 2 guinea pigs, because we were just kind of the ones feeling it out and figuring out how that was going to look for you all in the future. Studied in Amsterdam. And then as mentioned, after Amsterdam, I moved to DC with an internship that I found through a TAM alum working on State Department exchange programs. So, TAM definitely, as Davis and Kelsey both mentioned, TAM definitely prepares you for, with the academics and the subject matter and the resiliency that Kelsey was talking about. But you're also part of a very big and growing network that I really encourage you to utilize, because it's kind of like a family where, we're all trying to help each other out. And I would not be where I am now without getting my foot in the door with that first internship where, a TAM alum was the intern coordinator at the time. So don't be afraid to reach out to those connections and use them, because we've all been there and, we all want to help each other out and see each other succeed. Yeah, as mentioned, I did that internship for 6 months. This was again in 2010. The recession was still, kind of full blown at that point, not as bad as it was in 2008 when I graduated from undergrad, but wasn't great. So, kind of struggling to find full-time positions. But then the director of the department that I was working with recommended me for this other job in their grants unit. And, given the job market at the time and the fact that the director was recommending me, I was like, okay, I should probably not waste this recommendation. Now, with this grants position, I knew nothing about USAID. I knew nothing about working on grant programs, nothing at all. But here again, TAM prepares you to deal with, curveballs and address new things and with the skills that you gain. So pretty much everything I learned about grants and operations and all those things I learned on the job, backed up by skills that were reinforced through TAM. So then at World Learning, I worked there for, a couple of years more, and then transitioned to JSI after they won the follow-on award. So both of those projects, my organization was kind of positioned in the middle of USAID and our grantees. So we were basically running grant solicitations and running grant management for USAID, because they just don't have the physical capacity to do that themselves in some cases. And we were really working with the grantees too to build their organizational capacity and get them ready, so that basically trying to work ourselves out of a job so that eventually they wouldn't need us to be in the middle. They could directly receive funds from USAID themselves and be, confident and compliant with everything that they were doing. So started out doing more grants and then slowly shifted over into more finance, budgeting, and operations. In my last project, we either directly through direct implementation from our organization or through grantees, we had operations in over 40 countries. So I was helping backstop 10 different field offices, doing most of our budgeting. It was a 7-year, $261 million project. So, and it was more like 50 mini projects within a project. So each one of those has their own budget, which I was responsible for managing, lots of different moving pieces and fun things to deal with. So as time was going on, you know, I really enjoyed the work that I was doing. I definitely enjoyed learning more about international development, and specifically the grants that I was working on were focused on global health. But I knew that's not where my passion was. Again, certainly enjoyed learning everything that I learned through those experiences, but I was ready for something new. So, you know, it took some time, and I was thinking about, okay, I've gained all these skills through both, you know, my education and the experiences I've had in the professional world. Now, where can I take this? What can I do? And then perfectly, this job at US Soccer came up as a grants manager. As like, I know how to manage grants. I can do this. I love soccer. I started playing when I was 7. It's just, I was talking to Jalen yesterday and just saying, it's just kind of funny because now soccer seems like it's my entire life because I'm working on it every day. And then on the weekends, I'm watching games. It's just like 24/7 soccer now for me, which is great. I love it. But another nice thing too about the position that I have is that I'm working across all of our departments. So I get to work with our coaching department. I get to work with our sporting departments on, you know, what their priorities are and then fulfilling that through grants and scholarship programs. So we've got, you know, coaching scholarship programs to open up the coaching pathway to more coaches and get more coaches in the pipeline. We're working on US Soccer is a member organization. So we have, you know, members like US Adult Soccer, US Youth Soccer, all of the state associations like North Carolina Youth Soccer. And I run a grants program for them where they're trying to increase the number of players, coaches, and referees that they have. So just being able to work on, you know, main priorities for the federation and really, you know, kind of also I'm the first grants program manager they've ever had. So getting to kind of define my role and get to do, you know, basically define like what I'm doing and what this position will ultimately become is also a really cool experience. And, you know, Tam was a great experience. As much as, you know, we joked about being the guinea pigs, it was actually really fun to do that too, to kind of, and, you know, I think the flexibility that Tam gives you to focus on things that you really want to focus on and you really want to learn about, I appreciate it a lot. Some of my focus, both at UNC and in Amsterdam, was more on the international law aspects of things, because, you know, at that time I was still thinking maybe I'd go to law school one day. That's still a thought in the back of my mind to this day. But I was really able to focus on that and had the flexibility through class selection to really hone in on, you know, things that I was really interested in, as long as, of course, they relate back to the main priorities of the program. So that's something that I really appreciated. And again, as I mentioned before, just don't be afraid to leverage the network that you're in now, because we all just want to help each other out and, you know, help you get where you want to go.
Thank you so much, Mel. Yeah, it is great to hear these refrains from grads. You know, they appreciate the network, they have maintained friendships from the program, and then that they appreciate that flexibility. It's just great to hear it. And I'm glad that you've enjoyed this new position so far. It does sound like it brings together so many elements for you. Okay, we're gonna hear next from Nora, and she's in Dubai.
So my story is an example of why you shouldn't limit your options getting out of TAM. So basically, I went into the corporate culture and I went into just corporate world in general, which was very new to me. As an academic going in to get a PhD, I was thinking, this is what I want to do. You know, the future is research and advising people and all of that. So it was by chance, basically, that I was in Dubai establishing the Women Economic Empowerment Research Center. And then someone came and recommended, and they said, hey, there's this new position. I think it'll be awesome, great. There's no benchmark to it, nothing. You should go, give it a try. Basically, the facilities management, property management industry is not a sexy industry. So people don't want to really be a part of it. I didn't even think of the importance of what this is until someone approached me and said, look, this company is trying to get its unique selling point and create culture. Your experience with the nonprofit is beautiful, that it blends into what this culture means. And you want to look at happiness, corporate social responsibility, and all of that. So actually, this is where TAM came in, which is very ironic. So I had my first interview with the CEO and his best friend, who is a partner as well. So the CEO is from the UK. His business partner is from Northern Ireland. So he introduced himself and said, I'm Irish. And I said, no, you're actually Northern Irish. And he said, in Dubai, no one cares. No one knows the difference. I'm like, well, you know, I'm pretty cultured. I know Europe, you know? And he was, at that point, just loved the fact that I knew the difference, and I appreciated the difference. And I started talking to him about different cultural differences between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And so the 1 hour interview turned into 3 hours, because then we went into Brexit, of course. So it was the knowledge that I gained, the tolerance that you see in studying abroad with all the TAM courses, whatever country you get to, gives you a different perspective on how people see life, how you can start a conversation, how you can not offend people. And from that, you just can go forward, and sky's the limit, basically. So what when I started working there, I actually now got the company to be on the board of a UNDRR, which is the disaster resilience program in the UAE, in Dubai. So we are on the board, but because I understood the UN, I understood international politics, I understood the importance of all of that. So it was very great for me to bridge what corporations are doing between corporations and governments, and what we can do to work together to make, you know, the world a better place. So surprisingly, the skills that I gained through academics, through diplomacy, through interactions with different cultures, and this is all what TAM gives you, made me like a star employee in 6 months, which is beautiful. Like, I didn't even, the first day that I actually worked there, it was like 9 a.m. till 5:30. I decided to quit because I couldn't handle, you know, a boxed office where you sit and you do like a 9 to 5. I'm not used to that, because I went straight from TAM, went to get my PhD. So I didn't really, you know, experience an actual 8 to 5 job. So then I started negotiating. That's where the negotiation skills comes. And Siena helped me so much, because the professors there, amazing in like explaining their point of view and how you want. And I was trying to explain how I didn't want the professor to ruin Game of Thrones episode in class, and I'm like, hey, please. So we had to really argue our points. You had to choose your arguments, different terminology, different words, because you come from different cultures, different backgrounds, which is beautiful and strengthens how you want to make your point. So changing culture here is pretty interesting in the Middle East, basically. So working here is actually very relevant to what I learned in TAM, which was like every day. That's what I reflect on, and I'm like, no, I actually was really good at that. I don't know why, because I gained the skills to do it. But basically, the benefits from being in a program like TAM is basically not only the network, not only the lasting, you know, friendships and all of that, but really you being flexible, knowing how to lead life in whatever path you're in, and really not being afraid to just take chances. Just take chances, go in and try whatever it is that you can, and do not limit yourself. Don't think that, hey, because I'm in this path, there are 5 options that are obvious to me, but that's not, you're not doing yourself a favor, basically, because the things that I ended up doing at first glance may seem that they have nothing to do with what I learned, or nothing to do with TAM, but in reality, they are very, very connected, because this is part of what builds your personality, what builds you, and the choices that you make, the decisions that you make. So basically, I'm not gonna, I mean, if you want to know more about the nonprofit, you can ask me. It's still going, it's still Very healthy. I have 3 directors running it. I'm just a distant chairwoman right now because I can't be selfish and do everything. So I had to, it was very, painful for me to say, okay, I'll let you guys do, we have a hospital in Somalia right now, gynecology and pediatrics. We are thinking of going back to Greece because I got phone calls and, they need more help and more stuff is happening. So we might be basically training and equipping a new team to go there, because basically what we do is we certify everyone, CPR certification. We want everyone to know what to do there and not be a liability, basically. So this is ongoing. The census, the Maryland census just ended. What we're doing is looking at our successes and what's going on. But basically, I'm working on extending the nonprofit to the Middle East, because it looks like for the next 3 years, I'm going to be here. So this is it, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Much. Many thanks.